talk to me about employees that won't do what they want. More importantly, they talk about employees that don't follow the employee handbook. So I know that there's plenty of you that have spent a lot of time, effort, and energy putting together an employee handbook, and then wonder why it's not being used, which you can understand why someone would find that frustrating. Why someone wouldn't, do what was in the employee handbook that you spent hours and hours putting together. And I think it's really easy to think that the reason they're not following that employee handbook is because they are trying to ignore you, or trying to annoy you, or because they don't want to do a good job. And none of those things are true. When I see employee handbooks, or even when I just hear the term now, I kind of cringe a little bit inside, because I know that I've done this. I did this when I had a really big team, is that I put together this kind of novel of instructions of what they needed to do. And it wasn't until I spent some time, and in this particular case, it was in a restaurant. So there was a lot to remember. So like a whole food menu that you change regularly, and a beverage menu that you change regularly. Never mind the point of sale system, which I have to say is about the worst piece of technology I have ever worked with, that how to use it and how to make it go. And when I was waitressing the floor one day, I was like, man, we require them to retain so much information just to get through one day. And so the reality check for me was, well, none of my employees carry that around in their bag. I don't even have a book to demonstrate. But like your employee handbook, if you printed it all out, is like this big. It's not like a little notebook with like 10 pages that they can just pop in their pocket and use when it's useful to them. It's not something that they easily can refer to or easily find the information in it when they need it. And that's before we even dive into the fact that not everybody is a read-write learner. Only about a quarter of us, there or thereabouts. It's a very rough stat. But only about a quarter of us learn just by reading or just by writing. And so when we give them an employee handbook, we're assuming that they are naturally a read-write learner, whereas 75% of your employees are not going to be that. They're going to be something else. They're going to be either someone who likes to learn hands-on, they're going to be someone that learns through listening, or they're going to be someone who learns through visual. And when you only do it in that one format, you make it really hard for the rest of them. The second thing is, it's not easy to refer to. As I said, when I was working on the floor, I was like, oh, well, it's all in the employee handbook. But while I was waitressing, I didn't have time to go and dig through the 102-page document to find the page on which it tells me about that particular wine or that particular steak that I've just been asked about. And yet that's what we expect our employees to do. So people don't get their employee manual and go, oh, I'm going to ignore that because that's going to annoy my boss the most. That's not what they do. They get it and they recognize that they're supposed to understand all the information in it and that it's not going to be useful to them. They do this all without, conscious thought. And so they try to retain it in here as much as possible, or create shortcuts to get the work done in the way that seems most logical to them. And so you end up with this kind of half memorized, they think they're doing what's important version of your employee handbook. And that's incredibly frustrating, especially because as the boss of the business, you're really emotionally attached to, one, that your business is successful, and two, that things get done in the way that you defined that they get done. It's your business. You want people to have a great experience, and the way that they have a great experience is for people to follow the way that you do things. And so employee handbooks are a great first step when it comes to getting employees on board. It's not going to be a long-term solution. And if you're starting to get to a place where you've got a team that's growing, you're wanting to spend less time face-to-face with your team. So if it feels like, even though you've got this resource, you're constantly repeating yourself and you're like, oh, I'm at the stage in my business where it's great that I've got employees, but even though I've got employees, I still feel like I'm having to spend a lot of time at work and I'm having to spend a lot of time managing them and doing things with them rather than just allowing them to get on board. That's a really big sign that the way that you are teaching them, training them, having them use your systems and processes isn't working for them. So there's some shifts that I think really help. One is that you want to put the information where your team needs the information. So depending on what business you're in, it's going to depend on where you put this information. And an employee manual is not it. You want to put it where the team can use it. So for example, on our boat, we have iPads that allow the team to get through and do the work. So let's say they're setting up for dinner for people on board the cruise. They can set up for dinner and then come back to the iPad and go through a checklist. It's a little more fancy than that because it's on an app, but basically a checklist that says, oh, I've done all those things. Oh, I forgot to put the potatoes on, which is a great time to check it, because if you don't put the potatoes on now, in 2 hours time when you sit down to dinner and there's no potatoes, it's going to be a problem, right? So we want to put the information at the point where your team are doing their jobs, not in a book that they took home and not in a book that lives in their cubby, not in a document that just lives on their computer, unless of course they're at their computer the whole time. So if you've got a team that's on their computer, then something that is computer based, that's easy for them to search and find the information in, is totally cool. For a lot of us though, our teams are moving around and not necessarily stationary at a computer the whole time. The other thing is that you want to think about not all the steps, but what are the really key steps that you want to make sure are getting done. So yes, you have a certain way of doing things, but there are certain really important things that people must remember to do that are key to the business running smoothly, machinery being well looked after, the experience that the clients are having being the way that you want it. It's not all 100 steps, but there's probably 3 or 4 or 5 key parts of that step where you want to hold your team accountable. And so you want to set up ways that you know, regardless of whether you're there standing next to your employee or not, that you know that that system has been done your way. A really simple example of this is like on the boat. We want to make sure that there's always oil and fuel and water in the boat, because otherwise there's going to be some problems. 1, it probably won't start. 2, we're going to have some engine maintenance that needs doing. And 3, no one's going to be able to have a shower when they get on board the boat, which is not a good look. So you want to think about what are the really key inputs that need to go in to get you the result that you want. So for some of you, it's, if you've got sales team members, it's like, what are the inputs that they have control over that will result in them getting a sale? Is it the number of people they talk to per day? Is it the number of emails they respond to? Is it the number of proposals they put out? Because you know from your numbers that if they put out 10 proposals, you get 2 closed sales, right? We've got all that information and data. So you want to measure and hold them accountable to that stuff that's really important. It might be that you have a process that you follow for a client, and we were talking about this with someone that's in their bookkeeping and accounting business the other day, like reconciling their clients' bank accounts every day is really important so their client knows where they're at from a cash flow point of view. So that's going to be something you want to have some checks and balances in, that you can know whether it's happened, whether you're there or not. So the first thing is put the information where the team can use it when they're doing their jobs. It's probably, unfortunately, it's probably not your employee manual, and it's probably not the policies and procedures folder that you've got saved on your computer. The second thing is make sure you've got some accountability measures for the things that actually matter. Don't hold them accountable to all 100 steps of a system, just the key steps that will tell you that everything else is working. And then the last thing is that they're not going to remember everything the way that you do. They're not as emotionally attached to the way that they do it as you are. So you're going to have to help them align their success in your business with the success that they want to have in their lives. Because if you can align those two things, then you won't have to constantly ask them or tell them, worse, try asking, it works better. But you won't have to constantly tell and ask them to do the job, because they will understand that them being successful in your business allows them to be successful in their lives. And if you don't know what success looks like for them in their lives, that's a conversation I highly recommend having with your team. So it's not that they don't want to do it. It's not that they're ignoring you. It's not that the employee manual was a waste of time. It's just probably not ticking those 3 boxes for your team. And if you can get it to tick those 3 boxes, go right ahead and use it. I think it's a great first step. If you can't get it to tick those 3 boxes, then you want to think about, what do I need to put in place to do this differently, so that you can stop feeling like you're nagging. There is nothing worse. Like, you don't want to nag your husband or your partner. You don't want to nag your kids. You definitely don't want to go into your business and do the same thing with your employees. So if you feel like you're repeating yourself, those are some things you can go and check. Not because they're bad employees. They're great people. They really do want to do a great job for you. They just need the resources and the tools in the right place at the right time. Talk soon.